Video 22 sees the Land Rover engine and gearbox in the chassis and a few final pieces fitted. Right, here we are, engine going into the chassis. It's very heavy, this engine and gearbox. It's over 400 kilos, but it's finally going in. I've got the engine mount rubbers fitted to the engine at the front, and the rear I've got those and the brackets they sit on, so that they can go straight into the chassis. Getting it in line wasn't too bad. Getting a few nuts and bolts in while I had the weight on the crane, and then I can wind them in. That was late one night, and here is the next morning. There we go, the next morning with the engine in and looking good. It's time to get these last few bits fitted. A couple of little pulleys and tops and pipes and starter motor and manifold. I don't actually think I'll get around to fitting that today. That needs to be screwed to a bulkhead or something. But handbrake mechanism, filler pipe, fan, spark plugs. They're pretty new. I just fitted new ones to drive the vehicle up here, so they're good to go. And then I've got a few bits to clean up and fit. Carburetor, fuel pump, distributor, this thingamabob, and then I'll do a final painting of any green bits that need it, or duck egg blue, sorry, and any black bolt heads and things like that. So I've got it, like, there's a new bolt head, that'll be fine, but this one's cleaned up, so that'll rust very quickly. I'm going to paint all those up as well. So let's get into it. Right, first up I start with the water pump pulley, and then the fan that also bolts to the front of that, all driven by the crankshaft, of course. It's only that and the alternator. It's very simple auxiliary drive on this old engine. Tighten those up. And now I'm checking the specs for the spark plugs and gapping those. They're actually perfect, but I checked them all over. Screw those in, and again I got the torque spec from the book and torqued the spark plugs in. At this point I remembered that I hadn't actually tightened down any of the engine mounts or gearbox mounts. So that was the back right, the front right, back left gearbox mount, front left engine mount. And those are all torqued up nicely now. Now I'm onto the crankcase recirculation breather. This the mushroom thing on top of the cam cover. Next up is the clutch slave cylinder. Although you can't see it, it's below the chassis rail. That was new. I replaced it so we could move the Land Rover when we first got it going. So that's all bolted up. And next I'm onto the starter motor. So the studs go into the flywheel housing. I put some Loctite on those again. And the starter goes on with two nuts. And that is tightened into place. Very heavy old thing, but that's been cleaned and painted. Not necessarily restored, clean stripped and painted, that was all. Then it's the hose that goes to the slave cylinder, the clutch hydraulic hose that bolts around the back of the engine. So that's just a hard line. There's a flexi on the far end of it, which I'm putting on now. So there's a bracket which bolts to that side of the engine, and then the flexi hose bolts to that and joins to the bulkhead. Next up is the oil filler pipe. That is another one that bolts onto the side of the right-hand side of the engine, and putting some sealer on the gasket either side, and then bolting that up in place. Again, that was just a paint strip and paint job, that one, so that's the original part, nothing new here. And now we're on to something you can finally see on the side of the engine, which is the manifolds. So the inlet and the exhaust manifold. Took me a long time to figure out which studs go where. There's a lot of variation in lengths. Some are bolts, some are studs. Some hold the aluminium inlet component, some hold the exhaust, which is cast iron, so a lot of differences there. Yeah, so work those studs in with Loctite, put the gasket on, I'll fit it up. You can see there that was just the exhaust manifold now. They join in the middle actually, and the aluminium inlet manifold is connected to the exhaust manifold, which heats it. It's just a heated component. It heats very quickly, of course, because that exhaust manifold gets hot very quickly. So there's actually a join there, and there's exhaust gas can circulate around the base of the carburetor where the carb bolts onto the inlet, and it helps atomization, of course, fuel efficiency and emissions, I suppose, as well. Very common thing for an old carb engine to be heated like that. And it's a very simple, easy way of doing it. It's not a cross-flow head, so of course all the components are on the same side of the engine. So there was a bit of a gasket there to go in and a sealant. Tighten those down, torque them up, and the manifold's on. And then there's a few bolts to clean up, and then a block which goes on the bottom. I'm not sure if this is standard or an aftermarket modification, but it holds a Weber carburetor, which I don't think is standard. But as I said, that mounting block, I'm not sure if they all have that or that's just for the Weber. But that's all cleaned up and in place. Next up, I am checking the timing. I'm checking the timing for the distributor. So that's going to go on next. So I've pulled the rocker cover off, nice and easy now, because the gasket's glued to the head, but not the rocker cover. And then I turn the engine over. You can see those first two rockers moving. So I know that I'm on spark, not inlet or exhaust, after compression on cylinder 1. So I know how I can put the distributor in, you see. So now I know where I am, I can put that cover back on. After that preparation, the distributor can go on with a new gasket, lovely shiny gasket. And that's the base plate, or mount if you like, for the distributor. And then there's the distributor going in with the adjustment plate. So that sort of holds the distributor rotationally in that plate. So of course I got it the wrong way around. Now I've put it on the right way round. The distributor can go on. And now everything makes a lot more sense. You can get the tools in there to time it correctly and so on. So there you go, rotating the engine. Now this is me statically timing the engine. So I've just got the contacts on a continuity setting on a multimeter. Now I can turn the engine to, I forget what it was now, a few degrees before top dead center on the crankshaft, and then turn the distributor so it's just at the point where it's going to spark it. So that's the static timing done, if you like. The engine should run at this point, and then I'll have to time it again properly with a strobe. Well, this is where we leave it, folks. It's all in, lots of parts fitted now. Carburetor still to go on, and the last painting is done as well. I'm very proud of this. I think it looks great in the Ducko blue. The contrasting aluminium and black as well, and some rusty old bits around the manifold and exhaust pipe. That's not really fitted yet, but there we go. More to come. A lot of parts to do now before the bulkhead goes on. Prop shafts, brake lines, fuel lines, maybe that wiring to the rear and the rear lights. And then I can get on and try and fit the bulkhead. That's all for this video, folks. You've seen what's coming next. I hope you're enjoying the series. Thank you so much for watching this far, and tune in again.